Planet Earth is comprised of 1/4 land and 3/4 water geographically. The average human body is composed of up to 90% of its weight in water from birth. The human fetus spends 9 months approximately in utero and in water. All living creatures that have breath are born in and or from water. The Earth contains roughly 368 trillion cubic meters of water. Humans throughout history have used less than 10% of the world's water resources at any time. The average modern-day human being uses approximately 100 gallons of water a day. That is 5 times the weight of the average human being, over 800 pounds. The average healthy human being will drink up to 3 gallons of water a day. All of the planet's most ancient mythos, theos, and cosmologies record creation events that begin with water. All laws, since primordial antiquity, were written to regulate land and sea separately. Laws pertaining to land became the law of the land, or rather natural or common law, and laws pertaining to the sea became law of the sea, or rather maritime admiralty law, which is international law and the same everywhere in the world, no matter where you go. All laws since time immemorial originate from and are based upon ecclesiastical or canon law via the ancient laws and ecclesiastical right of kings. Natural or common law primarily preserves the inalienable rights and needs of human beings who live on land, differing between nations. The law of the sea, or maritime admiralty law, primarily grants the right that is legal to conduct merchant, banking, corporate, international commerce. Seeing how living persons cannot live on or in water for extended periods of time, and the Earth's seas have been used primarily for travel since antiquity, regulation of the sea for merchant, trafficking, shipping, and commerce through law became necessary for the merchants of nations to do business internationally. The law of the sea, maritime admiralty law, is universal and transcends all national boundaries and laws legally. What is legal is not necessarily lawful. Natural or common law, the law of the land preserving the rights and freedoms of living persons, is lawful. Maritime admiralty law, or UCC, Universal Commercial Code, is legal, and that legal robbery and murder. In ancient Rome, a Roman maxim law stated that he who will be deceived, let him be deceived, which means the responsibility of the deception is on the one that is deceived by it. Basically, if you get it up the hoop, or what we commonly refer to as being stiffed, shafted, that's your problem. Unbeknownst to everyone, maritime admiralty law, the international law of the high seas, came upon land like a flood and made every man, woman, and child since that time dead in the water. The word maritime comes from the Proto-Italic cognates mer, mar, mare, and mari, which all mean water. These cognates are found in words like commerce and merchant and maritime. The water that flows by currents in rivers is directed by the river banks. Water that flows in the world of maritime admiralty law is money, because money is water. Money is currency. It's liquid, as in liquid assets. Money, or monai, mono-eye, or simply one eye in maritime admiralty banking laws, is the lifeblood, the cash flow of the system of merchandising and traffic. To traverse this fictional world, there must be ships. Ships traverse water or the sea, and when they come to land, they come into a port. When you plug your electronic device into a computer, you're plugging it into a USB port, a universal serial bus port. The world of the internet is analogized with water as well. We have the deep web, and when you do a live social media broadcast on the internet, you are streaming the show. When a ship pulls into the port, it comes down a canal to where there is a dock, and there the ship is tied off. The ship's captain submits to the dockmaster a manifest of birth, a license and manifest of goods and services being delivered by the ship to the dock. The dockmaster signs the manifest claiming the cargo as property now of the ward, which includes livestock. All ships are female. A woman is a ship. A man is a fabricator. A man delivers semen into a vessel. The woman bears the cargo of the semen and labors for 9 months, wherein her water breaks, and the semen in the hold come down the birth canal through a port of entry and are delivered in a hospital delivery room. According to Black's Law Dictionary, a hospital is also a bank and also a church. The woman has shipped newly birthed Admiralty maritime product, stock, livestock, cargo. A doctor will untie the ship from the cargo, stock, the product by cutting the umbilical cord to the ship or vessel and sign a birth certificate, a manifest of birth, after the cargo has been stamped or daubed by a footprint and fingerprint with blood and ink. And after the informants, which are your parents, sign the manifest, which is plainly written on the certificate itself, your parents, the informants, are informing the doctor that the cargo, the stock, is now delivered and can be claimed by signature. The doctor signs the certificate, making you now lost at sea as unclaimed corporate property, cargo, stock, product, commodity. You are now legally dead in the water, and your name appears in all capital letters and on every other legal document. And as I said, legal is not necessarily lawful. The word capital, capital, etc. comes from the Latin caput, which means skull, and the word El, which is named for the Phoenician, Hebrew, and Roman god Saturn, which can be found in the Bible. Capitol is where we get Capitoline Hill, Golgotha, Capitol Hill, as in Washington, D.C. Caesar in antiquity ruled from the hill, just as modern-day presidents, monarchs, and popes rule from hills. A gangster may shoot someone in the head and say, "I capped him," a euphemism for a bullet causing death to the head. The word captain comes from the word capital, which means money or one eye, and equals water, the currency ration. All corporations are fictional. They exist on paper as a dead body vessel, just as your name in all caps on a birth certificate. The Constitution of the United States was formed in 1776, but the Constitution of the Incorporation of the United States was in 1871. The Corporation of the United States was formed in Delaware, Maryland in 1871 and became the United States, Inc. All citizens of U.S. Inc. have a license to work for U.S. Inc. They are employees. All corporations must have three things: a president, a vice president, and a secretary-treasurer. Everything in the world of merchant corporate banking law revolves around ships, as ships are carried by the water, which is the current sea, and all corporations are ships. If you want to have a car, you must have an ownership. If you want to be a citizen of a nation or country, you must get a citizenship. If you go into business with someone, you enter a partnership. If you want to learn a trade, you may enter an apprenticeship. Want to go to college and get your degree? Get a scholarship. Want to go buy a new car? You go down to the dealership. If you are traveling by car, you may enter a township before you enter the very town. When a man and woman get married, and the word invokes maritime admiralty law, they enter a business contract and obtain a marriage license to do business as a partnership. If you go to a church, which means a bank according to Black's law, you are going to a place of worship. Everything is a vessel, a fictional ship created out of thin air on paper in the sea of corporate commercial banking laws of pirates of the high seas. A person, according to Black's Law Dictionary, is a monster. According to canon law, Goyim translated from the Hebrew to mean nations, cattle, chattel, animals, beasts, non-human according to rabbinical sources which are authoritative in ecclesiastical or canon law, which includes Talmudic rulings. Goyim have no rights. Admiral or admiralty laws apply to the authority of the captain, who is the admiral of the ship. The captain, or rather the admiral, who has absolute power and control of the ship, can make up the rules as he goes along. The word admiral comes from the cognates admire, and the Phoenician Hebrew Roman name of deity, Saturn El. Wherever there is a crown, you had better admire and have admiration for the king who is the captain, commander-in-chief, or else. Under common law, there's no such thing as a victimless crime, and a victim receives compensation and redress for damages. Aboard a ship, the captain can make any act a crime and he can impose sanctions accordingly. If you have a house and want to sell it, you put it up for sale. You are placing a sale on a ship which will set sail and dock to another port when sold. When you send a package somewhere abroad, you are shipping it, even though it's more than likely traveling by land. If you are losing your house, it's said that your house is underwater. If you get in trouble with the IRS, or if you go to prison, it's said you have landed in hot or deep water, and someone has to come and bail you out. A ship pulls into a port and gets tied off at a dock. When you go to a court, your case is placed in a docket. All courts in the land are judiciaries. They are judicial courts operating under mixed Roman, common, canon, and admiralty maritime law under a crown. They are ships docked on land. This according to the Judiciary Act of 1789 passed by Congress, which made all district courts admiralty courts having maritime admiralty jurisdiction. The United States of America and the United States are two different entities. One is a corporation, the other employees of the corporation. The United States of America never ever did win its independence from the Crown in the Revolutionary War. The Charter of Virginia of 1606 granted colonists a license to settle and colonize America by the King. The Treaty of 1783, after Cornwallis surrendered to Washington at Yorktown, completely contradicts and negates the generally assumed and taught notion that America won its independence from Britain. The first article of the Treaty of 1783 relinquishes all claims to America except for the continued tribute to the King under the Charter of Virginia of 1606. The charter was invoked by King James I, who gave you the King James Bible, and it states in Section 9 of the charter, and I quote, "Yielding therefore to us, our heirs and successors, the 5th part of all the same gold and silver, and the 15th part of all the same copper, so to be gotten or had, as is aforesaid, without any other manner or profit or account, to be given or yielded to us, our heirs or successors." The Revolutionary War was over in 1781, but the Treaty of 1783 was signed 3 years later, which means the war was not over, nor was it won. The Treaty of 1783 upheld the tribute to the King's venture by the colonists, which means America remains to this day a British colony that pays tribute to the Crown, as imposed by the Charter of 1606. America was conquered. Liberty is not freedom. A sailor on a ship gets liberty when he's allowed to have a short leave from the vessel when the ship pulls into port. A dog has liberty on a leash when you take him for a walk. A prisoner gets liberty when he's allowed out of the cell into the courtyard for a few hours while under the careful watch of snipers. Liberty is a license. It is a privilege allowed by a ruler, owner, king, etc. to a subject of the same. America never has been the land of the free at any time. It's the land of liberty on the leash of the Crown. In the year 1106, the judgments or rules of Oleron were first implemented by Eleanor of Aquitaine, after her return from the Second Crusade, having accompanied her first husband, King Louis VII. These were codified maritime admiralty laws that were supposed to protect the Crusaders' estates and titles while they went and fought the Crusades. This was based on the Greek maritime law of Rhodes of 900 BC called Lex Rhodia, which in turn came from the mariner laws codified ecclesiastically by the Phoenicians, who began their merchant mariner empire in 1586, lasting 1,000 years. In the year 1666, a great fire broke out in London while the Black Plague was ravaging Europe. The fire was intentionally set in Pudding Lane, as some historians believe, to clear out the slums to make way for what would eventually be the City of London. Parliament, behind closed doors in secret, invoked the Sestuacavi Act of 1540, enacted by the then King Henry VIII, reworked and instated by Charles I of the time. Sestuacavi, from the Old French into English, means "this killed that life." This made all men, women, and children presumed and assumed dead, and a trust set up. According to Black's Law Dictionary, Sestuacavi means the person whose life measures the duration of a trust, gift, estate, or insurance contract. The life of a trust is 7 years under the law of limited liability. This act is most diabolically evil because it killed everyone and gave them 7 years to claim back their lives. The fires of 1666 also created the only parcel of land on the planet that does not have a title deed. the Golden Mile, the City of London, which is a corporation having its own flag, its own constitution and laws, its own defense and police forces. The Golden Square Mile holds the Bank of England, the London Metal Exchange, Fleet Street, FTSE Stock Exchange, the Royal Mint, and the Old Bailey Courthouse. The United States channels billions yearly to the Bank of England to pay the Crown's tribute. In 1913, the Federal Reserve was set up, the brainchild of a secret meeting held on Jekyll Island in 1910. As United States Inc.'s debt soared well above the estimated gold reserves the corporation of the U.S. held as a standard for the dollar, the Federal Reserve Act was passed on Christmas Eve while Congress was away, giving the power for a foreign corporate entity to print fiat and collect interest on monies created from thin air. A bank does not loan you money. That's illegal. A bank gives you credit, which is legal, but not necessarily lawful. In 1917, the Balfour Declaration was introduced, paving the way for the establishment of the State of Israel in 1948. The Bolshevik Revolution broke out in Russia that was funded and began by Wall Street bankers such as Jacob Schiff and J.P. Morgan. That same year, Woodrow Wilson signed in the War Powers Act that basically stated that the U.S. was stopping all trade with the enemy except for those whom are granted a license, which excluded Americans. Licenses began to be issued in 1933. In 1933, the U.S. had reached Section 11 bankruptcy. President Roosevelt amended the War Powers Act of 1917 and declared all U.S. citizens as enemies of the state. There was a declared national emergency on March 9th, with an emergency act being passed placing all power, property, and resources of the U.S. into the hands of the President under martial law that has continued ever since. This is renewed yearly by executive order. The Federal Reserve began to print fiat money. The all-seeing eye was placed on the dollar bill. All men, women, and children born ever since arrive as collateral for U.S. Inc.'s debt, as slaves and enemies of the state. The balance of debt versus collateral is determined through illegal wars for profit, where the debt versus collateral is balanced, or rather the herd of slaves is thinned out. What all this means, ladies and gentlemen, is you are all slaves and cannon fodder for the nations you are in and who are subservient to the rulers running them. You have been turned into collateral for national debts. Consider this when hearing about the imminent collapse of the economy soon to take place. When debts cannot be paid, you are said to be in deep water, and those in deep water usually drown. Shylock, according to Shakespeare, asked for a pound of flesh to pay the bill. The owners of U.S. Inc. demand the same according to Admiralty Maritime statutes you are all under. The sun never did set on the Roman Empire, and Rome is just as alive today as it was a couple thousand years ago. You are all owned property and subservient to a crown, whether you like it or not. You are all considered dead and unclaimed by the crown, who laid claim and made you their bitch. You cannot, nor are you allowed to speak for yourself, as dead persons cannot speak, and is why you need a lawyer to speak for you in a court. The dead have no rights. This is all based upon ancient ecclesiastical or canon law at its root and core. When you board a ship called a church, which is also considered a bank under maritime admiralty, and embark upon it, the licensed and registered pastor or priest must teach and keep you obedient to the monarch, the crown. Because he who wears the crown, which is the monarch, is the head of the ship called church. He is the king, the lord and captain of the ship called church, and the pastor or priest is an agent of the crown. Maritime Admiralty, or rather Universal Commercial Code, or UCC, is the matrix pulled over everyone's eyes that governs all, because everything has been made into ships on the sea of corporate commerce. Without their one eye, which is money, which is water, all ships are dead at sea and cannot traverse their fictional matrix they created. It's now high time for a concerted universal mutiny.
We are opposed around the world by a monolithic and ruthless conspiracy that relies primarily on covert means for expanding its sphere of influence, on infiltration instead of invasion, on subversion instead of elections.
Right now, there's a lot of talk about the mark of the beast and what it might be, and with good reason. With all of the drastic changes going on around us since the COVID-19 scare began, the world has become almost unrecognizable in most ways. Most churches have been eerily silent about the agenda that's currently playing out right before our eyes, an agenda of totalitarian control fueled by the fear of a virus that may or may not have killed tens of thousands of people just in the US. But are the changes we're seeing in government control and hard-handed leadership driving us toward a new world order? If so, is the Antichrist and the mark of the beast the next step of this path? What exactly is the mark of the beast? Is it an RFID chip or mandatory vaccine? Or is it a much larger, reality-changing structure that is now falling into place? Let's take a look. To understand the mark of the beast and the Antichrist system, first we have to review the Bible. Revelation 13:16 through 18 says, "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Remember that in the Bible, your right hand represents your works and deeds, and your forehead represents your thoughts and will. Then, in Revelation 14:9 through 11, the Bible says, "Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If anyone worships the beast and his image, and receives his mark on his forehead or on his right hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever. And they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name." So how are we supposed to know what the mark of the beast is when we're forced to accept it or reject it? How can you possibly warn your loved ones when you're not even sure what to look for yourself? The beast systems. Many Hollywood movies have shown us an Antichrist figure who forced the entire population of the world to receive a 666 symbol, an RFID chip, or a barcode on their heads or right hands of the willing. This is a fictitious, overly simplistic depiction and is meant to deceive you. Remember, Hollywood is run by a highly Luciferian agenda. Even many so-called Christian movies use just enough scripture to sound like their messages from God, when in reality it's darkness masquerading as light. It is intended to deceive Christian believers with half-truths. When we look at Revelation 13, we see that there are two different Luciferian powers working during the end times. There are two different beasts. The first beast is the beast of the sea. This beast we can associate with the Antichrist system, the system that the world has been living under for hundreds of years. It represents a system of slavery to government, debt, fear, sickness, and oppression. Notice that in Revelation 13, the first beast is not the one that gives the mark of the beast. It's the second beast that causes all of the world to make a decision about the mark of the beast. The second beast is called the beast of the earth. It's a false prophet system of darkness masquerading as light. It represents power to the people, wealth, prosperity, and hope. Circling back to Revelation 13:11, it says, "And I beheld another beast coming out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon, and he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him." This is the beast that will deliver the mark. This beast, the beast of the earth, doesn't make its presence widely known to the world until the very end of days. Who do the two beasts represent? Revelation 13 shows us that the two different beasts, although separate and distinct, are both derived from the pits of hell. But they have very different agendas. Their agendas can be described in the New Age belief system as dark versus light. Although light may sound like something positive that we want to believe in, remember, it's not the truth and the light that comes from Christ. It's a very false light that's meant to deceive us into believing in a different God than our heavenly Creator. It's a light that, through a false prophet system, promises prosperity and hope, but does not point us to the one true God and eternal salvation through the sacrifice of Christ. Although most people believe that the mark of the beast will come from a dark, evil, clearly Luciferian leader that will arise in the end times, the truth is actually very different. The mark of the beast will come from a leader within the second beast system that promises peace on earth and prosperity for all. It will be a deception that will be set up to fool even the most elect in Christ. The transition between the first beast and the second beast is happening right now during the COVID-19 agenda. That's why we need to understand what it is before we become a part of the great deception that now seems to be heading our way. As you look around the world, it's difficult not to notice that the entire economic system of the first beast has begun to crumble before our very eyes. The US dollar, the default world currency, has been watered down to the point of no return with a $6.2 trillion economic stimulus package that goes almost entirely into the hands of the elite. Beyond that, most small businesses have been shut down by force and will never recover, while nearly 40 million Americans are now out of work since the COVID-19 scare began. Where are these people supposed to find jobs when and if the lockdown is ever lifted? The truth is, these things are being done on purpose for 2 reasons. Number 1, to destroy the current economic system while preparing us for the new system, which has not yet been announced. And number 2, to make the population rely completely on the new system once it is announced. In other words, without accepting the mark of the beast, it will be nearly impossible to live any semblance of a normal life in the new normal. The truth is, we're not going back to the normal that we knew. The reason is that we are transitioning between the first beast system, the beast of the sea, into the second beast system, the beast of the earth. And there is a solid plan that will soon be announced that will lead the world into the mark of the beast. You may have heard about NESARA. NESARA stands for the National Economic Security and Reformation Act, and was introduced into the United States by a man named Dr. Harvey Francis Bernard, a Louisiana graduate in systems philosophy and an engineering consultant and teacher. Dr. Bernard created the NESARA proposal during the late 1980s and early 1990s. He printed 1,000 copies of his proposal titled Draining the Swamp, Monetary and Fiscal Policy Reform in 1996, and sent copies to all members of the U.S. Congress, believing it would pass quickly on its merits. Yes, draining the swamp. Sound familiar? Although the mainstream narrative states that the proposal died before gaining any traction, the truth is actually quite different. NESARA was secretly passed by Congress on March 9th of 2000. In fact, Bill Clinton is said to have signed it into law under heavy military duress. Bill Clinton is part of the Dark Cabal, the First Beast system. But the U.S. military, which strongly backs the QAnon movement, part of the Second Beast system, or the Alliance, pushed the NESARA agenda forward under threat. NESARA is the new economic system that will be introduced into the U.S. after the dollar has fully collapsed. GSARA was signed into law in 2015 as part of the Paris Agreement. It is an extension of NESARA and will fuel the new economic reset for the rest of the world. If you remember, Trump removed the U.S. from the Paris Agreement in 2019. This wasn't due to climate change. Simply stated, the U.S. doesn't need GSARA because it has NESARA already in place. With a little research on NESARA, you'll see that it's the hope of the new world that the New Age movement is looking for. In fact, even many in the QAnon community have learned about NESARA and are waiting patiently for its announcement. The New Age says that NESARA is a spiritually directed financial program that can be attributed back to Saint Germain. It was designed to provide a new economic system for the world during the time of transition. But where does the money to back NESARA, this new economic system, come from? The idea behind NESARA and a dark to light financial reset began with Saint Germain in 1729. It was then that he began a world trust that all the elite followers of the light have been contributing to for hundreds of years now. The amount of wealth that the Saint Germain World Trust has accumulated is incomprehensible. In fact, the number is so large that it might as well be infinity. Saint Germain's plan was for the World Trust money to be distributed during Christendom's second millennium, or the year 2000. That was when he intended for the world to transition from dark to light, from the Piscean Age to the Age of Aquarius, from the first beast in Revelation to the second beast. However, as we got closer to Y2K, the Dark Cabal wasn't yet ready to surrender control of the world. In addition, there were many prophecies that had not yet happened, and the population of the world just wasn't yet prepared for such a large-scale transition. The next plan was to bring forth NESARA on September 11th, 2001. However, the Cabal was still not prepared for this transition. And you remember what happened on that day in order to stop the transition from happening. It's thought that the gold to back the economic transition to the Saint Germain World Trust and NESARA was stored within the World Trade Center and was stolen by the Cabal at the time of the alleged 9/11 attacks. However, the Alliance has since taken back the wealth. It's believed that it may now be stored in the Global Seed Vault in Svalbard. The transition is happening now. We're now in 2020, experiencing an unprecedented time in world history where the vast majority of the world has been officially shut down. The transition in power from the first beast to the second beast is happening right now. As Q routinely posts, we are moving from dark to light. As Trump famously said, we were in the calm before the storm. Welcome to the storm. Welcome to the transition. But remember, the light that will emerge is a false light, pretending to be the real thing. It is not of the Heavenly Father, but rather Lucifer, the angel of light. The coming promise of Nisara and a worldwide economic reset of prosperity for all is a false light that will be the mark of the beast. When the new economic system is announced, all who choose to become a part of it will be forced to make an oath to humanity that will eternally separate them from God in order to become a part of the new system of earthly prosperity and peace offered by Lucifer, a false prosperity and peace. But why would swearing an oath to humanity be a bad thing? In the Bible, James 5:12 tells us, "But above all things, my brethren, swear not, neither by heaven, neither by earth, neither by any other oath, but let your yea be yea, and your nay, nay, lest ye fall into condemnation." In addition, Matthew 5:34 and 35 says, "But I tell you, do not swear an oath at all, either by heaven, for it is God's throne, or by the earth, for it is his footstool." Matthew 6:24 says, "Ye cannot serve both God and money." Matthew 6:19 through 21 says, "Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust doth corrupt, and where thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust doth corrupt, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also." The mark of the beast is the new economic system of prosperity that was laid out by Saint Germain and his World Trust so many years ago. It's the false promise of a utopia on earth without the need for the God of heaven. Yes, a physical implant or mark that will allow you to buy and sell will be a requirement of becoming a member of the Mark of the Beast system. But that is only a symptom of what the true mark is: a decision to choose earthly riches over eternal riches. The mark of the beast is you deciding to partake in the new wealth of the new world and the light Luciferian system that backs it, rather than the eternal treasures of the one true God and the heaven on earth that he promises us when Christ returns. But why will Nisara be so difficult to say no to? The Great Awakening promised by Trump and Q will be the greatest deception ever perpetrated on mankind. Here is what it will promise through Nisara. Forgive all mortgage, bank debt, and credit card debt due to the cabal's illegal banking and government activities. Eliminate the Federal Reserve System. Abolish income taxes. Abolish the IRS. Create flat-rate, non-essential, new items-only sales tax revenue to fund the new government, drastically increase benefits to senior citizens, return true constitutional law to all citizens and courts, establish new presidential and congressional elections within 120 days of Nisara's announcement, create new U.S. Treasury currency, the rainbow currency, one backed by gold, silver, platinum, and other precious metals. End the bankruptcy of the United States initiated by Franklin D. Roosevelt in 1933. Stop all special interest groups. Closely monitor the validity of elections. Establish worldwide peace wherein U.S. troops will be brought home from around the world as peace is declared. In alignment with the Constitution, there will be no standing armies, and that will be permanently observed. Release enormous sums of money for humanitarian purposes. Enable the release of thousands of suppressed technologies currently being withheld from the public under the guise of national security. This includes free energy devices, anti-gravity devices, and sonic healing machines. 6,000 technologies will be released initially, followed by the release of more than 60,000 more technologies. Initiate the first phase of worldwide prosperity distribution of vast wealth that has been accumulating for hundreds of years. Nasara and Jasara will create an entirely new system of worldwide currency that's fully transparent, backed by gold, not governed by bankers, and runs on the blockchain, an unhackable, ledger-driven accounting of every transaction ever made. This will offer full transparency and privacy and is 100% traceable. Can you see how this will sound like a very good thing, and why the New Age and Q followers are so eager for this great awakening? But will you buy into the mark of the beast? Who do you trust? Do you trust the fear that the world is pushing down your throat right now? Will you trust the Nasara solution when it's presented to solve all of the world's problems? Mark 10:24 says, "How hard is it for them that trust in riches to enter into the kingdom of God?" God is not the God of this material world. The mark of the beast is what will eternally separate you from God, because God doesn't promise you earthly riches and material wealth. In fact, He is in direct opposition to it. It's your heart that shows God where your allegiance is. Are you focused on Him, or are you in love with the things of this world? When you're forced to make the decision to take the mark of the beast that will seal your eternal fate, what decision will you make? Jesus faced the same decision. Now it's your turn. When you're making your decision, remember that Lucifer offered him all the kingdoms of the world if he would pledge an oath to him. Matthew 4:9 says, "All these things I will give thee, if thou wilt fall down and worship me." But in the next verse, Jesus replied, "Get thee hence, Satan, for it is written, Thou shalt worship the Lord thy God, and him only shalt thou serve." We will all be presented with the exact same proposition, and it's coming soon. Right now, the world is perfectly set up for this great deception. When the time comes, will you answer as your neighbor does, or will you answer as Jesus did?